Back Look Cinema, the podcast.
He's not a freak and he can take you anytime. He's killed dozens of people and doesn't have any mercy or anything. He even kills little gals. He doesn't have a name, so death can't find him. He doesn't have a home with people to care for. You're not afraid of anything, none least of all. He's fast and strong like the big Ren. He can hear 100 miles or see 100 miles underwater. He can hide in the shadow of the noon sun. He could be right behind you and you won't even know it till you're dead.
Hello, friends. My name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back. This is the 172nd episode of Back Look Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then please tell your family, tell your friends, and tell that guy over there who seems to have an incredible affinity for the open ocean about Back Look Cinema. And I hope that you enjoyed that little opening that I did. I didn't actually hire a young actress. I used an AI contraption that I found on the internet that I've experimented with here or there. So this particular contraption is called voice.ai, and I think it's at voice.ai.com or something like that. I can't remember. And so most of the stuff is locked behind a paywall, but some of the stuff I found that was free to use. They're like the samples that you could use in order to entice you to buy more of the product. So this voice was the closest that I could find that sounded like a little girl. And so I decided to experiment with that. It kind of like when you put it through the voice changer, it kind of messes up the accent a little bit and it messes up some of the words. Like for instance, one of the things that I couldn't say for some reason was dead. Like at the end, she says, and you won't even know it until you're dead. And a lot of the times instead of dead, it would come out as da. And I don't understand that. And then it's like, when I say it, I'll say it in my, this mid-Atlantic accent that I have around the Washington, D.C. area. But somehow, in some portions of the recording, when it goes to the AI, it kind of sounds like a New York accent or a Boston accent. And I don't know why it did that, but there it is. That's the AI taking over, making choices that I didn't make. But anyway, let me know what you thought about that opening with the use of the AI voice changer. I'd really like to hear what you thought about that. And also, the next thing I want to talk about is a reference to the previous regular episode, and this was the episode on Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan. And this was a message that was actually left on the YouTube channel, which I was surprised because I never expect a lot of listeners on the YouTube channel. Like normally when you tune into YouTube, you expect to watch something. You don't expect us, because like on my YouTube channel, for most of the videos that are like podcast episodes, it's just a static image and then just, the podcast going, just me talking. There are very few episodes that I have that are video episodes. That I got a couple that are bonus episodes where I do reviews of movies that had come out recently, but most of my content is audio only, and I try to let people know that it's audio only so that they're like, ooh, I'm going to watch Saving Private Ryan, and they click on it and it's just me talking about it, and they're lost and confused and upset or whatever. But anyways, I was surprised because I got this great, 6-paragraph letter from a listener, and it was incredible. It was so informative, and I appreciate all the feedback. So I want to read to you a portion of this letter, the second paragraph, because I came across some things that I didn't know. This message is from @ikevech558, or maybe it's @IKVETCH558, and that's his YouTube handle. And here's the second paragraph. However, it is important to draw a line between realism and historical accuracy when considering SPR. Editor's note, that's Saving Private Ryan. Since Spielberg was focusing much more on realism and the personal experiences of war than he was on making the movie accurate to historical reality. For instance, in reality, the U.S. would never send a mission out to find a single soldier like that. Not if they did not even know if he was alive or where he was. If he had been captured and the U.S. knew where he was, they would have perhaps considered a rescue mission, but not in these circumstances where there was no way to know where he was or if he was even alive. In the case of the real Nealon brothers that Spielberg somewhat based his story on, no mission was sent behind enemy lines, and the fourth brother was found and notified by the Army chaplain, then sent home. As far as the last brother, none of what happened in this movie happened in real life. And I did a little bit more research on the Nealon brothers, and what I found, and I kind of wish that I had did this research when I did the episode or before I did the episode, so it could be included in that episode. But what I had found was that, like in the movie, there are four brothers, and what happened in real life is that two of the brothers died in two separate incidents. Another brother was presumed dead, but they actually figured out that at the end of the war that he had been captured. He had been shot down and captured by the Japanese, and he had been held prisoner until the end of the war. So it was actually two brothers that survived. And as the writer had stated, they didn't have to send a rescue mission to find the fourth brother. The fourth brother was, serving at Normandy, and then he was the Army did at that time have a kind of sole survivor policy where if there were devastating loss in a particular family, then they would, I guess, sequester the survivor of the family that was in the war, and they sent him back stateside where he served out the remainder of the war. So that's interesting. Obviously, the story that Steven Spielberg made is wildly different from the real life story, as you might expect. But that was a wonderful letter. If you go to the YouTube and to that video, you can see the entire letter. He gets really in depth about his opinions of the movie and his thoughts, and I really appreciate all of that. So let me go on to talk about the movie that is before us now. So the movie that we're going to talk about now, I saw on my birthday, or it was either on my birthday or the day before my birthday as a birthday present to me. Because sometimes as a birthday present to myself, I will take myself to the movie. And and it was a movie that I had wanted to see. And there was much anticipation for this movie just because of all the controversy surrounding this movie. And the main controversy surrounding this movie was just how expensive it was to produce. And so it's funny now that, because now it's like budgets go up on movies and people don't really bat an eye about it. I mean, they take note of it, but it wasn't a big deal. But when this movie came out, the budget was a big deal. People were kind of mad at this movie, and they treated it like it was their money that was being wasted or spent trying to make this movie. So the movie that we are going to talk about on this episode is Waterworld. We are currently experiencing the consequences of climate change due to human industrial activity. These may come in the form of an Arctic vortex, record-breaking heat waves, devastating droughts that intensify unimaginable wildfires. But what will ultimately happen in the millennia to come? In one vision, the world could be swallowed up by an apocalyptic flood and dry land becomes a legendary myth. The remnants of humanity might survive on ancient seagoing vessels. Perhaps a young girl could be found with a secret that suggests that dry land is not a myth. Perhaps this girl is pursued by dangerous pirates who want to hoard the treasure of dry land for themselves. It may come to pass that this girl is rescued by a mysterious lone seaman. This man, for unknown reasons, may have an affinity for the ocean like no other man. The only question being, will this lone hermit, this mariner, be motivated to help this child on her quest to sail across the water world to enjoy the riches of this fictitious dry land? This movie was released on July 28th, 1995. My birthday is July 29th. And it was produced by Universal Pictures, Gordon Company, and Davis Entertainment. It grossed over $88 million in the US and Canada, and over $264 million worldwide on a reported budget of $175 million. It would have needed $300 million or $350 million just to break even. And it didn't do that, as you can plainly see. It was a ginormous budget, and it was a lot of marketing in order to get this picture out, get people to see this movie. But no, there was nothing that they could do to save this movie, and I don't understand it. If we adjust it for today's dollars, then we would say that it would have grossed $183 million in the US and Canada, and it would have grossed $550 million worldwide, and the budget would have been $364 million. It's like, so $550 million just would not have been enough to save this movie from basically being a flop. And once again, I do not understand, because I remember when I went and watched this movie, and I really enjoyed this movie, and I was surprised that it was a flop. And I don't know. Sometimes that happens, I guess. Sometimes that happens. This movie is starring Kevin Costner as the mariner. You may have also seen him in The Postman, Dances with Wolves, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, that I covered in episode 129, or Open Range. Costner has this affinity for these big, giant, expansive epics. He recently tried to do this Western. I forgot the name of it. He put up so much. You know what the name of this movie is. I can't remember right now, but you know what I'm talking about. And he likes Westerns. Like, currently he's starring in, what's it called? Yellow Bridge, Yellow Range, Yellow Ranch, Yellow something, Yellowstone. That's what it's called. And that's like an epic Western on television. And I haven't seen it, but it looks really good. And that's his jam. And so in this movie that he had made, he wanted like a 4-movie epic, and he wanted to be big and long and expansive. And he had put like his house on the line to get this movie made, and it flopped so hard at the box office. It's like, it was either the marketing that could have been it, because I barely heard about this movie, or it could have been just people just weren't particularly interested in seeing an epic Western. I can't tell you what it is, because everything that I heard about it, I've heard people really enjoy the movie, but I don't think people were really into Western epics. He was also in a movie called Wyatt Earp, and Wyatt Earp came out around the same time as Tombstone. And while Tombstone has a more, I would say, conventional pace of a Western movie, I think Wyatt Earp was a little bit like more of the type of epic that Costner really enjoys, and that didn't do well at the box office. So you can see the type of things that he likes to do, but a lot of times these things just don't work. And some of the things that, like Dances with Wolves, is another type of long epic movie, and people really enjoyed that. And he tried to do something again like that with The Postman, and people didn't like The Postman. And Waterworld was the same thing, this like huge epic, and people didn't go to the theaters for that. But man, I like both The Postman and Waterworld, and maybe I have issues and complications because I find both of those movies immensely entertaining. So up next is Jeanne Tripplehorn. And she plays Helen. You may have seen her in Basic Instinct, The Firm, or Sliding Doors. And she's also done a lot of television. Then there's the legendary Dennis Hopper. And he plays Deacon, or the Deacon. I'm not exactly sure. And you may have seen him in Easy Rider. I was able to talk about him on Speed, the Speed episode, episode 46, if you want to check that out. And he's also in True Romance. I think this is one of his best performances in Waterworld. I would say that he was very good at his job in Waterworld. I'll put it that way. And then there's the young Tina Majorino. She plays Ilona. She's one of my favorite characters in this movie. And you may have seen her in Napoleon Dynamite, Veronica Mars, or Bury Me. And then there's Gerard Murphy. He plays Nord. And you may have seen him in Batman Begins or Sacred Hearts. He's a fun character. R.D. Call plays Enforcer, or perhaps it's the Enforcer. Character doesn't really have a name. His job is to enforce the peace. I think maybe he's like a sheriff. And you may have seen him in Last Man Standing or Colors. And lastly, and these are just the people, this movie had an enormous cast, and I'm just talking about the people who had a greater impact on me as I watched the movie. And so this final actor is Michael Jeter, and he plays Old Gregor, and you may have seen him in Open Range or The Green Mile. This movie was directed by Kevin Reynolds. You may have seen him, or you may have seen some of his movies, including The Count of Monte Cristo. I think this was the Antonio Banderas version. I forgot to write the year, but I think it's that version. He's also directed Risen, Tristan and Isolde. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Correct me if I'm wrong. 187, The Beast of War, and Proof. I've seen some of these. I've seen The Count of Monte Cristo. No, I've only seen that one, but he seems like a fairly good director. This movie was written by Peter Rader and David Twohy. Rader had written The Last Legion, and it seems like that's the only other thing that he's written besides Waterworld. And then there may have been like a couple other projects where he directed or produced, but he doesn't have a huge resume. Twohy, on the other hand, has written a lot of stuff, including The Fugitive, Pitch Black, G.I. Jane, The Arrival, and Terminal Velocity. And I did an episode for The Fugitive. I haven't seen G.I. Jane, but it's one of the movies that I wanted to see. But The Fugitive is fantastic. The music in this movie was composed by James Norton Howard, and you may have heard his music in King Kong. Again, I don't remember the year. I don't have the year, but it's Peter Jackson's King Kong. Snow White and the Huntsman, The Village, Jungle Cruise, and Raya and the Last Dragon. So yeah, there's a lot of talented people that went into making this movie. And I don't have any new announcements, just the same old things that you've heard episode after episode. The shop at backlinkcinema.com/shop, where I keep promising new designs, and new designs do not come forth. But all I have are intentions at this point. And then there's Bazaar de Alonso, that is the hypothetical at this point eBay shop that I want to put up to sell stuff. But those are all the announcements I have. So now I want to get into the next segment, and that's going to be the favorite parts. So, as I've said, I thoroughly enjoyed the movie when it first came out, and I was surprised that it wasn't a smash success. I was surprised. I was surprised that it was not a blockbuster, and I don't know if I had any conversations with other people when I saw it about how they felt about it, but I really liked it. And it's hard to narrow down like just 5 of my favorite parts because there were so many uh things. There were so many sequences in this movie that I liked. There were so many actors that I liked. There were so many character well, not necessarily character developments, but character traits that I liked about certain characters that, that it's hard to just narrow it down to 5. So forgive me if I meander just a little bit as I talk about this movie. And this movie starts with the Universal logo. It was, if you remember the Universal logo, it's the globe of the earth. And then with different movies, they'll like do different things with the logo. Like if I think in they produce the Incredible Hulk, so maybe the globe of the earth turned green. And in some other movies, if it's a movie about like a frozen wasteland, then the globe of the earth might frost over. I like the different things that they do with the globe of the earth and the title, the Universal, that comes across the earth. They're very creative in this way. And in this particular sequence, you see the globe of the earth, and then as the globe gets closer to you, you start to see that it's changing. You see land masses disappearing, and it's slowly being swallowed by water until the globe of the earth, by the time you see the full Universal logo, it's the globe is completely covered with water. And so that's fantastic. A side note, there isn't really enough water on Earth to completely cover all of the land masses in water. I just want to throw that out there. This just not possible. At least not enough water in the form of liquid water. There is supposed to be water under the crust of the Earth that's in some kind of strange crystalline state, and I'm not even sure it can be reconstituted into liquid water. In order for there to be enough water to cover all the land masses, you would need several fairly significant asteroid impacts that are filled with water in order to achieve that. But as it stands now, it's probably not possible. I mean, this is not to say that we're not going to lose some cities. Like, there would definitely be a loss of a lot of major cities should all of the ice caps melt, because that's the premise of the movie, is that the ice caps have completely melted. But I don't see a scenario where all of the land is completely gone. But still, that doesn't stop me from enjoying this movie. It's just a little tidbit that I wanted to throw out there. But it's fun. It's fine. It's not a big deal. Just throwing that out there. There are several things I want to shout out. So I just want to shout out the look, feel, and design of the world in this movie. I love the world building. You have different factions. You have like the drifters that are just kind of on the open ocean, just like sailing and looking for stuff. There are the smokers, which is a large gang. It's almost like a drifting nomads on the ocean that are going around, just a bunch of pirates going around harassing people. They're called smokers because they're probably the most technologically advanced of all the other people on the earth. Who all the other people are basically unpowered. They very little use of electricity or motorized vehicles. Most of the smokers have some type of motorized vehicle. They have sea-doos, they have planes, they smokers because they have vehicles that smoke. And plus, a lot of them somehow have cigarettes that have survived through the centuries. And these cigarettes must taste awful. And I'm not a smoker, but I understand, or I don't smoke cigarettes. I've never smoked. But from what I understand, people who smoke, there's a flavor that they enjoy. And a cigarette is more flavorful when it's brand new, or the closer to the time that it was created. There's a freshness to the cigarettes that the cigarettes that they smoke in the movie could not possibly have, because this is like hundreds of years after the fall of civilization. It's been so long that life has had time to mutate and to different and strange forms of life. So this is a long time. and they're able to find some cigarettes somewhere in the vast ocean, and that's what they're smoking. And as I said, I can't imagine it tasting good. It must be so addictive that the taste doesn't matter. Where are they getting the cigarettes from? How many cigarettes is available? How many? How much? What does their supply look like? I can't even tell you. And also, it must be very expensive because obviously it's a limited supply. But all of the smokers are smoking, and it's only tobacco. It's not. Nobody found any marijuana or anything like that. I like the overall look and feel of the movie. What I especially liked is a lot of the vehicles, the boats and the planes, how they somehow took vehicles that were hundreds of years old and basically made them viable again. They made them look like they were lived in and falling apart, and yet still operational. One of my favorite vehicles is the boat that belongs to the mariner, and it's a trimaran or trimaran, something like that. It's a 3-hull boat, so it's got this main hull, and then it's got these 2 outriggers that are off to the side of the boat, and it just looks real sweet. And he's like climbing around with it, activating all aspects of the boat and whatnot. It's like the boat is kind of set up almost like a Looney Tunes contraption, where or like one of those, like the mousetrap that you see on Looney Tunes, how they'll roll a ball and the ball will tip a plank of wood over, and the plank of wood hits a bell, and the bell will knock another pebble to do something else. And it's like, that's kind of how his boat was set up. And I thought that was fun. It's just overall neat. And they had this giant artificial atoll where there were like some of the last bastions of humanity. Like if you weren't on a boat and sailing out in the open ocean, then you were on maybe one of these artificial atolls, and where people basically have a somewhat stable life. And one of the most valuable things that you can bring them is dirt, so they can put the dirt somewhere and plant some plants and have some much needed vegetables and fruits. And I think the fruit that they probably needed the most were any citrus fruit, right? That's probably one of the most valuable things you can get. I'm pretty sure that in this, if humans had not already evolved so that they didn't need citrus fruits to survive, then they're going to need citrus fruits. There's a lot of like subtle humor in the movie, a lot of dark humor that I really enjoyed. I think that was my favorite thing about the movie, was the dark humor. One of my favorite things. I hadn't even thought about that because I'm supposed to be pointing out like 5 of my favorite things, and as I'm watching the movie, I'm making notes, and I know that I enjoy the humor, and a lot of the humor is dark, and I hadn't realized that's something I need to make a note of. I need to make a note that I love the dark humor in this movie. And a lot of it comes from the mariner, and a lot of it comes from the deacon himself. And that's another one of my favorite parts, is just Dennis Hopper just chewing up the scenery. It looks like he's enjoying himself as the deacon. So, like, an example of this dark humor, and especially when it comes to Dennis Hopper, is that he's taken he and the smokers, this huge gang of ne'er-do-wells, these pirates, are going to take over one of these artificial atolls. They're like villages on the ocean, so they're taking it over. They're attacking, and they take it over, and thereafter they've heard rumor of this little girl that has the map of dry land on her back, so they know that she's there, or that she's supposed to be there. So the deacon has a couple of the villagers like strung up, And he tells both of them, the first person who tells me about this little girl survives or gets to live. The first person who tells me about the little girl gets to live. And they both start talking roughly around the same time, trying to tell what they know about the little girl. But the deacon is able to determine who spoke first and shot the one that was too slow. Like the guy didn't speak fast enough. He shoots and kills that guy and starts to talk to the guy that spoke up first. And so this guy tells everything he knows about the little girl and where the little girl might be. And so the deacon points his gun at the dude, and the dude is like, wait a minute. You said you wouldn't do it. You said you wouldn't shoot me. You said I get to live. And the deacon is like, he's like genuinely consternated. He was like, oh man, I might have did. I might have said that. I might have did. I might have said that. And so he gives his gun to his second in command, the guy named Nord. So he gives his gun to Nord, and Nord shoots the guy. Because I think I think what he's rationalizing is that I told you I wasn't going to shoot you, but I didn't tell you that somebody else might not shoot you. I guess that's how Deacon is rationalizing having Nord shoot the guy. So I thought that was real funny. There's another funny part, this dark humor, and this comes from like the Mariner. It's like the Mariner's inability to relate to other people. He doesn't, like, they discover early on that the Mariner is a mutant, so he has gills behind his ears. He is not fully human. And somebody else, old Gregor, refers to him as an ithico, ich to you sapien. It's kind of hard to say. I wrote it down. There are a bunch of letters. I don't know how these letters are put together. I think he said it's the itch to you sapien, basically referring to a type of human that can live underwater. So the Mariner's appearance is fully human except for the gills behind his ears, and his feet are webbed. And the villagers at the atoll immediately want to kill him when they find this out. So apparently this is a thing that happens with the Mariner. It's like, as soon as they find out that he's not fully human, then they want to attack him. So even though he has to deal with people, he is largely distrustful of people. He doesn't really want to be around people, but he has to occasionally meet up with people in order to survive, or just to meet up with people just to appear human. But he doesn't like to hang around people. And so he lives a life of solitude. And in that solitude, he's content. But when he has to hang around with people, he becomes cantankerous and selfish and nasty and mean-spirited. And in this mean-spiritedness, he doesn't like to share anything that he owns. So there's a point where the little girl and her guardian they bargain with him to be rescued by him. So they're out on the open ocean in his boat being rescued, but he doesn't really want to take care of them. And there comes a point, and he doesn't want them to touch any of his things. And it comes to a point where they're messing with his stuff. They wreck a bunch of stuff that he owns, and he's really angry at them. And they try to put up a brave front, like they're not afraid of him. And there's something in him where he doesn't want to kill them, but he's so angry that he cuts off their hair. And that was funny because they both have the long, luxurious hair, and he's so upset with them that he cuts off their hair. And that's a funny part. That's part of the dark humor. Or one of the things that he does is that he has these wax crayons, and Enola, the little girl, she finds the crayons and she starts basically doing graffiti all over his boat, and he gets real angry at her, and he takes his crayon back, and he seems to have the emotional development of like a 5-year-old, and he's like, these are mine, you can't have these are mine. Right? That's how he communicates. But later on, the little girl is like, she's hard-headed. So she's always stealing the markers. Because that's the reason why he cut off both of their hair, is because he was yelling at him about something else that he did, about something that they did that he asked him not to do, and caused a whole bunch of damage to his ship. And then as he's yelling at him, he's looking at the little girl, and he sees that the little girl is holding one of his crayons that he already told her not to mess with. So he's just like, and she's caught because she didn't realize that she was holding the crayon while he was yelling at them. Another moment that I really like, and this relates to the Deacon, is after Deacon loses his eye. He starts the movie with two eyes, and there's a huge battle. He gets caught in an explosion. He takes out one of his eyes, and apparently has a remarkable tolerance for pain. Because, I don't know, when you lose your eye, I imagine there's a lot of yelling and screaming and moaning and stuff like that. But he kind of doesn't do any of that. Maybe they have great pain medication. Maybe they discovered some incredible anesthesia as life progressed and evolved into whatever form it might take, because he doesn't seem all that bothered by it, except for how it makes him look. Obviously, you don't look as good with one eye as you do with two. And at first they tried to create an artificial eye out of something like a golf ball or something, or a ping pong ball or something like that. Like they take this ball and they paint an eye on it, and they cram it in a part of his skull where his eye is supposed to be. And he shows that there's, a bunch of his crew there, and he's looking around on his crew, and he looks horrific. And he looks at his crew and he says, "How do I look?" And the crew says, "Oh, you look great. You look fantastic. You're beautiful, boss." And then he asks this kid that's on his crew, and he says, "How do I look?" And the kid says, "You look like shit." And he says, "See, the kids tell the truth, right?" And then somehow the golf ball or whatever gets knocked out of his eye, and he opts to wear an eye patch instead of a fake golf ball. So that was really funny. And as horrific as he looked, he also looked kind of funny. At this point, I've named like 3 or 4 of my favorite parts that I really loved about this movie. I'm kind of losing count right now. It's kind of hard to go through every single thing that I've absolutely loved about this movie. But I just wanted to point out that those specific moments of the characters, especially the Mariner and the Deacon, and the actors portraying those characters, I want to particularly look at the character of the Mariner. He has a fantastic story arc. It goes from extremes. Like when he first starts off, when you first meet the Mariner, he is very selfish, self-centered, and necessarily so, because he is suspicious and wary of everyone he meets, even though he occasionally has to interact with people in his world. So he tends to stay away from them when he can. And whenever he meets up with other people, it's like shenanigans ensue. It's like he can't meet up with other people without going on some type of adventure. So his wariness is understandable, and to a certain extent, his stinginess is understandable, and his unwillingness to connect with other people. But as the women are trapped with him on his boat, I mean, not necessarily trapped. I mean, he did threaten to dump both of the women, or at least one of the women. Like, he wanted to throw the girl overboard to spare her the possibility of her starving slowly to death, or something, or dying from lack of water, or something of that nature. He's very pragmatic about the life and death situation. But there's something in him that prevents him from engaging in any action that's too rash or too harsh. He's a pretty good anti-hero. And while he's with these women, or this woman and this girl, for however long he's with them, could be days or weeks. He gets attached to them. He gets attached to the little girl, and he feels for the girl when he realizes that she doesn't know how to swim. And he's never met anybody that didn't know how to swim on Waterworld, and he takes it upon himself to teach her how to swim. And so you can see him be more human or more caring, and how it kind of happens slowly throughout the film. And maybe it's perhaps it's a little too sudden for some viewers, or maybe they didn't like that. But I think that's one of the things I enjoyed about the film, his character arc, going from the type of person that will throw away a little girl just because the little girl kind of annoyed him, to being the type of person that will rescue the little girl because he values her life. He values her companionship. So at the end of the movie, he goes out for, with the sole purpose of rescuing her from the smokers. And I just love that journey, and I love that journey for him. And so that's definitely the character arc of the Mariner is definitely one of my favorite parts. And I think that the last thing I'll say that I think all of our favorite parts of this movie, if you enjoyed this movie, were all of the incredible action sequences. They were just fantastic. It was pretty well done. I remember being absolutely thrilled and overjoyed watching the action sequences when I first saw this movie. And then when on a rewatch, because like I'm kind of weary of watching a movie on a rewatch, that remembering how bad people talk about it, or how they used to talk about it, and thinking, am I really going to enjoy this film? Are these scenes really going to hold up? Are these action sequences really going to look as amazing as they did when I watched them the first time, or as I watched them the first time? And as it turns out, yes, these action sequences are still amazing. It's still thrilling. It's still a post-pounding, awesome, good time. And I love, it's kind of hard to pick one. It's like the very first, one of the very first action sequences when they're at the atoll, the artificial atoll, and the people of the atoll are being attacked by the smokers. And at this time, the Mariner is imprisoned by the people of the atoll because they believe that because he's a mutant that he needed to be destroyed, because all this fear and hatred of people that are not like them. And then the whole thing of him being rescued, and then and he's rescued, and then he rescued the women who rescued him, and they escape on his boat. I don't want to say the type of boat it is again. I'll get confused. But anyways, and then there's the action sequences where, the little adventures that he has at sea with different people that he meets up. It seems like everybody that he meets on the sea, that he meets them on the sea or that he wants to trade with, he has to have some kind of a fight. It's like, it's never like mutual. Well, I don't want to say never. Maybe there's a one time when he had contact with somebody that was on the ocean and, they were friendly, but almost every other time, it turns into a fight. Or there's a time that he met this guy, like early on in the film, he met another drifter. That's the guy that drifts around on a boat like himself. And he sees him and they have kind of an exchange, and the guy's kind of acting weird and funny. And then off in the distance, they see they're being approached by smokers. And the guy already has a sail up and he's sailing away. The Mariner's ship does not have its sail up. So it's kind of just drifting in the water. And then the guy's taking off. And as he's taking off, he's showing off how he stole the Mariner's limes, because the Mariner had a little lime tree. And apparently he needs vitamin C. And what had happened was he had dove off his boat to go on an expedition underwater. And by the time he came back on his boat, that's when he saw the guy just drifting there, acting kind of funny. And then when the smokers came, the guy kind of took off because he already had a sail up. And then as he's taking off, he's kind of showing off the limes that he stole off the Mariner's boat while the Mariner was underwater. Kind of like, haha, I got your food or whatever. And so the mariner takes off after him because his boat is highly automated. It's like he just pulls a couple of levers and all of a sudden his sails go up and he's in hot pursuit of the guy that stole his fruit, his limes. And he disabled the dude's boat and he's able at the same time able to recover his limes. So, you know, it's stuff like that happens on the ocean to him. It seems like all the time. And then the final sequence where the mariner rescues Enola, that was a fantastic sequence. Just like the whole thing with Enola in captivity, it was I'm just laughing out loud like most of the time when I'm watching this movie. And the funniest sequence that had happened in that rescue is that the mariner goes up into the huge ship that's commanded by the deacon. This is his headquarters. It's the headquarters of his smokers. I'm not sure if there are other smokers in the world, but this is the headquarters for his smokers. And it's not really under any kind of power. It's a giant vessel is basically reduced to being a rowboat. And it happens to be an oil tanker. And this is where they store their oil. And apparently they're also able to refine the oil right there on the boat into a fuel that they can use. The problem being that, you know, a rowboat is a slow way to travel. And they never got around to erecting sails on it. It's a huge rowboat. Because it's where they store all of the oil. When the mariner shows up and he goes on deck and he demands of the deacon to return a girl. And the deacon was like, you know, what are you going to do about it? You know, you're on my ship and you're surrounded by my men. And then the mariner produces a flare and he lights the flare and he says, and the deacon's like, you're not going to drop that. You're not crazy enough to drop the flare down the hole into the lake of oil that I have on this boat. And the mariner does just that. But see, that's not the funny part. The funny part is like after the mariner drops the flare hits the oil, it ignites the oil, and then there's like a wave of fire that's going down the length of the ship. Within that storage space for all of that oil, they got this guy, and this guy's sole responsibility is to measure the oil that's in the boat. He has like a stick or a tape measure or something like that. And he sticks it down to the bottom of the boat or the bottom of the storage container. And he can read off how much oil is left on the vessel. So they can calculate, what they would need to go from one place to another or whatever. And apparently this is this man's entire existence, is just living down here in this storage container. Apparently they don't ever lift him out of there. And so he's in there and he sees this wall of fire coming towards him because the oil has been set on fire by this flare. The wall of fire comes towards him and he says, "Oh, thank God." And that was so funny to me. Like this dude has been praying for death and finally his prayers are answered. So that was fantastic. And as I say again, this whole action sequences that surrounds it, is just fantastic. It's so adventurous. It has a lot of the tools of adventuring that they like to use in movies, like the fighting, the swinging from one high place to another, all the things you like in an adventure movies, they have in this movie. So I'm not sure why it didn't do better at the box office, or why so many people have a negative attention or a negative memory of this movie. I am kerfuffled. So that's all. Those are all the parts I don't want to cover. I'd really like to know what some of your favorite parts of this movie was. So if you could please send me a note. I would love it if you could write a comment if you're watching on YouTube, or if you could write an email at fanmail@backlookcinema.com. Let me know what some of your favorite parts of this movie was. And I would like to just I had a couple of notes that I wanted to go over. And one of those notes is they tried to give you a clue as to what exactly this oil tanker was. The biggest clue that would probably give it away was there was a scene where the deacon was basically he had a little setback in his plans, and he's talking to his crew, and then his crew leaves, and he's in his office by himself, and his office has a decoration of this portrait of this guy. And he's kind of saying to the portrait, he's like, it's you and me up against the world or something like that. It's like he's like counseling with this portrait. He's like, yes, it's here we go again, Joe. The portrait is of Captain Joe I think it's Hazelwood. So if you didn't know who Captain Joe Hazelwood was, then you wouldn't know the significance of that moment. Because if you did know who Captain Joe Hazelwood was, then you would know why you would know the vessel that they were on. But not content with giving you that clue, at the end of the battle where the mariner rescues Enola, the boat's sinking. And as it's sinking, you could read the rear of the boat, and the boat happens to be the Exxon Valdez. And if you're unfamiliar with the Exxon Valdez, that was one of the greatest ecological disasters in the late 19th century. I should say the late 20th century. So I don't have all the details here, but basically in the late 1900s, the Exxon Valdez had struck a land. It had struck something in the water, like it was going through a dangerous part of the ocean that was near the Alaska Keys or something like that, and it struck some rocks, and it caused it to spill oil, and it caused this huge oil spill. It was one of the I think it was, at that time, it was the biggest oil spill in the world at that time. It was the biggest oil spill in recorded history. I might be wrong. You can look it up. I didn't do all the research on the Exxon Valdez, but it was a big deal when I was growing up. It was a big deal that this oil tanker had hit some rocks in the ocean, or hit some underwater land, or however you put it. And apparently it wasn't being piloted by a captain. It was either being piloted by the first mate or the second mate. I don't know. I don't remember all the details. But it spilled a lot of oil, and that caused a lot of fear, anger, and consternation among the American public. Yeah, we didn't like that. We didn't like this oil spill thing. So that was a bit of poetry that this movie would use the Exxon Valdez as the enemy ship for our anti-hero. The other note that I wanted to make was that they had a different ending for this movie. They call it the original ending, and I think I prefer this original ending to the ending that they actually used in the movie. I think basically they just cut it down for time, because it's basically the same, except the original ending had a more of an extended scene. So in the original ending, he says he has a heartfelt goodbye to Nola, because they find dry land. They're on dry land. They find dry land, hooray. And they defeated the smokers. So they were able to interpret the map. So the mariner he decides that he can't stay on dry land. And apparently people were suffering from land sickness. He says he needs to leave because it doesn't feel right. It doesn't move right. It doesn't move like the ocean moves. So he's eager to get off and get back into the ocean. And they found a boat. There happened to be a boat on the dry land. So he's going to take that boat and go back on the ocean. And Enola is really upset about this because she's really grown attached to the mariner. And so she had a heartfelt goodbye, and she's so upset that she kind of runs away or whatever, like how children do. And she's not like running away from her parents or anything. She just kind of runs off into the distance because she's feeling a lot of emotions. And then he kind of says goodbye to Helen, and then he takes off on his boat, and that's pretty much the end of the movie. But in the extended version, he not only says goodbye to Helen and Enola, but he also says goodbye to some of the other members of the team. The old Gregor and the enforcer, they also survive. So he says goodbye to them. You know, they have a bit more of an exchange. It's more extended. And the other thing is that he has a long conversation with Helen because she doesn't want him to leave. And it's nice because you get a more concrete reason why he's leaving. One of the things is that his motivations feel more concrete as to why he wants to leave. Old Gregor had told him that there are probably others like him. And apparently this has been chewing at the Mariner for a long time. So he decides that he's going to try to find other people like himself, other people that are have mutated to where they can breathe underwater, other people that have gills behind their ears or wherever. The other thing that he wants to do, the other reason he wants to go back into the ocean is that he tells Helen that if he finds anybody else that was like her and somebody that he likes or somebody he feels that he can trust, that he was going to tell them about dry land and tell them how to get to dry land so that they could have hope and they could try to find the dry land. So that was I felt like those were stronger reasons for leaving dry land, at least for him, because it doesn't make sense for him to leave because it's like he can always swim in the ocean. It's like the ocean is right there. The only thing I'll say is that this extended ending probably goes on a little bit too long because there's a thing where they kind of walk around the island and then they see a plaque, and so they brush off the plaque and they discover that they're on Mount Everest. So it's apparently the peak of Mount Everest is the only piece of dry land that's on the earth, that's on around the whole world. But I think that goes on too long. I don't think that the audience needs to know where they're at. I would have preferred that stayed a mystery. I think it works better as a mystery than it does. It doesn't really serve anything for us to know exactly where they're at. But I did like a better description of the Mariner's motivation for leaving. The other thing that happened is that Helen gives the Mariner a name. The Mariner isn't really a name. It's more of a descriptor of what he is or what he does. You know, he's on the ocean. He's a mariner. Or you could have just as easily called him a drifter. But he never tells anybody his name, and he may not have one. And so Helen tells him this story, and it turns out to be the story of the Odyssey. And she says that, you know, basically she's kind of giving him, she's basically explaining, by telling him this story, she's expressing her hope that he would come back, because in the story of the Odyssey, you have the hero, he goes out away from his home and his family to go fight in the Trojan War. And then while he's out, he tries to come back, but the gods are angry. So the gods basically have this hero zigzagging in the ocean or getting trapped on different islands, having a difficult time getting home. But then the gods forgive him, and then he's allowed to come home. And she tells him that the name of that hero is Ulysses. And in a sense, this is the name that she's giving him. It seemed to me that she's giving him this name, Ulysses. And that's another thing that's on the extended original ending. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but there's a 3-hour cut, and they call it the Ulysses cut. And I think that's why they call it the Ulysses cut, is because that's supposed to be his name. So those are all the things. And I usually talk about like the themes of the movie. I think the theme of the movie is that people can change. And that's one of the things that happened with the Mariner, is that he changed, as I explained earlier, from being like a really mean and nasty person to a person who is less mean and less nasty, and he gained empathy through his adventure with the people that he ended up rescuing. I think that was the main thrust of this movie. It was his particular journey and his change. And of course, it has strong themes of climate change, global warming, and those sorts of things. But this is like surface level and obvious. But I was thinking about what could possibly be a deeper meaning behind the more obvious meanings. So that's it for this segment. And now let's go on to the next segment, which is what? The trivia. All right, we are here with the trivia top 10. I got all of these from IMDb, and I hope that they're accurate. They're not always accurate, but I didn't cross-reference. So I am hoping that they're accurate. But it's the thing about Waterworld is that at the time that the movie was being produced, it was one of the most talked about movies that were, that was being made. I remember I used to watch Entertainment Tonight all the time, and I remember how they used to talk about how, all of the production that was going behind Waterworld. And so it turns out there's a lot of trivia behind this an incredibly huge and complex movie. So let's start. The preferred 3-hour cut of director Kevin Reynolds was drastically edited back to 135-minute theatrical version by Kevin Costner and the studio, probably in an effort to recoup the film's inflated $175 million budget, since Costner's previous 3-hour movie Wyatt Earp from 1994 had been a box office bomb. ABC later broadcast an extended TV version that restored almost 40 minutes of deleted scenes, which explained more about the world, the people who live there, the smokers' religious beliefs, and their ability to refine crude oil. The additional scenes also tie up several loose ends in the theatrical release. Being a TV special, this version was also censored for violence and language. A fan edit of the film called Waterworld, the Ulysses Cut, named after the restored scene at the end, was later made in an attempt to create the most complete version of the movie. It was compiled from several broadcast versions containing all of the additional footage from the TV version while restoring the previously censored parts. In an unexpected turn, the original distributor officially sanctioned this fan edit, releasing it in a box set with the other two versions. This Ulysses cut was remastered in high definition, created with original footage rather than lower quality broadcast material. And I am curious. I think I want to see this 3-hour version of the movie. I'm going to go on the websites and I'm going to look for and try to find this 3-hour cut of the Ulysses cut of Waterworld. After Kevin Costner showed interest in the film, he insisted that his friend Kevin Reynolds be given the director's position, and Charles Gordon, with whom he had made Field of Dreams in 1989, be the producer. Reynolds initially refused because of major disagreements between him and Costner on the set of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves from 1991. Gordon had to bring in Reynolds and Costner together and act as an intermediate before the two made amends. Gordon said that he literally locked the three of them inside a hotel room and he wouldn't let them out before they worked it out. Later, Costner had another falling out with Reynolds over the film's direction. It is rumored that director Kevin Reynolds and Kevin Costner had a huge squabble over the film, resulting in Reynolds walking off the project and leaving Costner to take over directing and oversee editing. Reynolds was quoted as saying that Kevin Costner should only star in movies he directs. That way, he can work with his favorite actor and favorite director. Ooh, that's a sick burn. Prior to Titanic 1997, this was the most expensive movie ever produced. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. I was getting my words all twisted up. I was unsure, and here it is. It really was the most expensive movie up until that time. The difference between this movie, Waterworld, and Titanic, is that Titanic was actually a huge success. But people are having different opinions about Titanic now, and I don't know. I'm trying to figure out if it'll have the same impact on me as it did when I first watched the movie. That's due for a rewatch. Kevin Costner personally invested $22 million of his own money into the film. So, wow. The floating atoll set used up all the available steel in the Hawaiian Islands. When more was required, they had to be flown in from California. The runway at Kona Airport actually had to be extended by a quarter mile to accommodate the heavy planes that had to land there. Next one. The major problem during the shoot was the cast and crew becoming seasick all the time. Almost every remedy was tried, including dermal patches. In the end, they found out that ginger snaps worked quite well for a majority of the people, so an enormous amount was eventually consumed. It's funny. I wonder how that worked out. Oh, this is a big one. Filming on water came with a lot of unforeseen problems. Scenes taking place inside the 2,204,622.62 pound floating atoll set could be filmed just off the coast. But for scenes taking place on open water, it took hours to bring the set and ships at least 2 miles off the coast to get a view that offered 270 degrees of open water. Turning the set or the trimaran so that the camera would pick up land was also very time consuming. There was limited space on sets for cameras and their operators to move, and they also had to compensate for the motion of the sea. Local weather conditions usually deteriorated in the afternoon, so most filming had to be stopped after 3 or 4 p.m. To make matters worse, about 30 additional boats used by the cast and crew were needed for lighting, cameras, makeup, catering, costumes, etc., none of which had bathrooms. Filming had to be stopped repeatedly so people could be ferried to portable toilets on a barge anchored near the shore. All these limitations usually allowed for only 5 or 6 setups on each day of filming, significantly extending the shooting schedule. That sounds horrific. Did they not learn their lessons from Steven Spielberg when he tried to film Jaws? Up next, where possible, sets were made largely of wood that was painted to make them look weathered and rusted. New sails were painted to look old and ragged. Since the set had to be built on location as much as possible, the production added more than $35 million to the Hawaiian economy. So, there was a bright side to that after all. And lastly, Jeanne Tripplehorn and Tina Majorino nearly drowned on their first day of filming when the trimaran they were on sank, dragging them behind it. So that's horrific. I'm so glad that they didn't experience a horrible fate. So that's it for what I found to be the most interesting trivia. There's a lot more trivia that's on IMDb that is available if you want to check that out. But right now, what we're going to do is we're going to see what the critics thought. So, as I said before, this was not a well-reviewed movie. The critics gave it a 45%, and the audience have it at 44% on Rotten Tomatoes. On IMDb reviews, it actually scores a little bit higher at a 6.3 out of 10. Tony Black from Cultural Conversation wrote, Waterworld has the epic scale, the grandeur, the towering oceanic shots, the boisterous, if sometimes misjudged score, and the vast, expansive sets. It just has no soul. And to that, I disagree. I mean, for multiple reasons. I totally disagree with that. Up next, we have Todd James from the View Weekly, Edmonton, Alberta. He wrote, Dennis Hopper is hilariously evil, upstages Kevin Costner in every scene, and is a much needed breath of fresh sea air. Yes, I can agree. Or at least I can agree that he was awesome in the movie. I don't know about upstaging Kevin Costner. I think that Kevin's, the Mariner, the character that he played is really an understated character. He's like the exact opposite of the Deacon. So I would not say that he's upstaging Kevin Costner. I think they're exactly where they're supposed to be. Mal Vincent from the Virginian Pilot wrote, there are hints that the editing ran amok in an all-out effort to reduce the running time to the present 2 hours. And I'm not able to see that, but he's probably seen a lot more film and can recognize the edits. So, and he is correct. I think that's exactly what happened. As I read in the trivia, they had to cut a lot out of the movie because they wanted to bring it down to 2 hours. And then we have Ed Travis from Synapse, and he wrote, Waterworld may not be a masterpiece, but is certainly a shining example of large-scale entertainment as only Hollywood can deliver. And you know what? I can agree with that. Finally, Waterworld is, as of this recording, available on Netflix. Now, after buying a physical copy of a much-beloved movie, I wanted to sit back and watch what seemed like a title that I've been chasing for like a couple of weeks. And I had ordered a movie on Amazon, and I wanted to do an episode on Strange Days. That was supposed to be the next episode. And as it turns out, I bought a Blu-ray for the wrong region. It's I guess it's region B or region 2. I don't know. Or I got it off of Amazon. Of course, they're going to show you the face of the DVD, or they show you the DVD cover. And I somehow missed the markings that showed that it wasn't marked for the United States. So I can't watch it. And I think I missed the deadline for returning it. So now I'm stuck with a DVD that I can't watch and kind of perturbed. So won't be watching Strange Days next week. And I'm just looking around trying to find a movie to watch. And so what I've decided to watch was Rush Hour. That's a classic movie that I love to watch. And there was a recent podcast that had talked about it. And I was like, you know what? That'd be a good movie to talk about. So next episode will be Rush Hour. You can follow us on Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and sometimes Twitter. Please contact us or me, as it's really only me, with any questions, comments, or suggestions at family@backlookcinema.com. Please rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. And as I said earlier, if you're listening on YouTube, please like or subscribe and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like this show, and please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlook Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe. Share a movie with yesteryear with your family. Hug your loved ones. And if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.